Hi everybody, Leslie here. I'm back in my craft lab and this is the first in my series of 5 ways. So I've actually got 5 cards for you today and 5 different ways to do a new technique that I'm going to call rotating die cuts. This idea has been buzzing around in my head for ages, and the idea is I like the look of cover plates that make things like windows or that, allow you to have really fancy patterns like this. But I don't want to pay all that money for maybe a cover plate die that I won't use all that often. I've got lots of lovely basic shape dies, so I'm going to show you a way using rotation that you can use those dies to cut apertures, and you don't have to worry about measurements or spacing. It automatically sorts itself out for you. This will work on any square card. My next video will deal with rectangular cards, so like A2 or A6 if you're in the UK. So whatever size card you're doing, we're going to start with squares because it's simple. I've done some with pattern paper today, window effect. So the reason I came up with this is I quite like the idea of having like a window and a scene showing through. I just did a simple one just to show you what I meant on this one. But if I used my square die and then I tried to move it over and line it up properly and then move it down here and line it up properly, I'd get myself into an awful mess. But with this technique, it comes out perfectly every time. And if you did have a cover plate die that cut, squares or circles, it doesn't need to be squares, it can be circles, you're stuck with it cutting the whole thing, because even with partial die cutting, I couldn't have done this on a diagonal. If I had one with 4 circles as a background cover plate die, I could cut 1, 2 partial die cutting, but I couldn't do it on a diagonal, if that makes sense. So I could have had all 4 circles on this one. I chose just to do 2. So that was another one. It doesn't need to, it can be a fancier shape. This one was with a little stamp shape die. And again, I was going to show 5 different ways or 5 different things you can use to do the same technique. And then I got really fancy to make a shaker card that, it's a cover die look with the scalloped hearts, but there's only 2 dies that I've used to get this effect. I am going to very quickly apologise. It is freezing cold, so I've got my great big fluffy hoodie, so I'm hoping my sleeves don't get in the way. And I did, throughout filming this video, have my die cutter on a little camera, but I didn't realise until I got to the end that at some point it froze. So I thought it was working the whole way through, but it wasn't. It's frozen. So unfortunately, I'm talking away like you can see me die cutting, but sometimes at some point it froze, but hopefully you'll still get the idea. But I can't remove it from the footage because it's recorded. And so when the die cut camera freezes, I'm really sorry, but these things happen and I didn't notice while I was filming. If you're already a subscriber and you're waiting for me to announce the results of my giveaway video, I am going to do that in another video in a couple of days' time. If you're not subscribed and you'd like to still enter, if you're really quick, that might still be open. I'll turn off commenting on that video. It's the last video, the one straight before this is my 1,000 subscriber video. And if you are quick enough, that might still be open. Like, subscribe, share if you've got crafty friends. I explained in that video why those things are all so important to us small creators. Thanks for watching, and let's get on with it and make these cards. So the first card today, I'm going to show you how to use basic square, any square die you've got on any size square card. So the method I'm going to show you will work for anything that's square, and it will actually work for any shape of aperture as well. So whatever shape die and holes you want to cut, you can do it. But I thought I'd show you with a square on this one because you can make, obviously it's nice window style, and I've got 2 cards using this same method to start with. This is a fab piece of 12 by 12 pattern paper, which I have had for years and years and years. This has got to be more than 10 years old. This is from the Do Crafts Paper Mania Portobello Road range. Although it's a 12 by 12 paper, you can see it's actually a repeat of 4 6x6. So I cut it down to 6 inches. I've got a 6-inch card blank, and what I wanted to do was make it so that I can see the blue and red on the pattern paper. So I cut my square down to a 15 centimetre square, because if you don't know, 15 centimetre square is just a tiny bit less than 6 by 6 inches, and it actually leaves a really nice size mat around the edges. So I'm going to show you how I made this piece. Again, any size square. So I know I want a 15 centimetre square, so I'm just going to cut my piece of red cardstock down to 15 centimetres. 15 centimetre square can be 6 inches if that's what you're doing, or it could be 5 inches, it doesn't matter what size. And then you just want some thin copy paper. So this is just whenever my printer decides to print some gobbledygook, I just save it. So you need to cut that to the same size. So whatever square you're using, you need to cut your paper to the same size. So you should then have your template and your square that are the same size. Then this part, you only need to do it once. If you're going to repeat use this, you can do that. And I will explain what I mean as we're going along. And then, so I'm just marking the halfway point. So because I've got a T-square ruler, I only need to mark it once. If you've not got a T-square ruler, I would recommend the very, very inexpensive on Amazon. I think I got 2 of these. My daughter has one somewhere for her art portfolio as well. And I think both of mine, the 2-pack, I think was under £5. So they're a really inexpensive piece of kit. They just make lining things up much, much simpler. So I've just drawn a cross across the middle. So now I can see where my quarters are. So this just helps. If you're really good at eyeballing it, you don't need to do this. But I think if you're doing squares, it's very helpful. And again, I'll explain why. So I'm putting a diagonal line in. So I'm just put my ruler corner to corner and make sure it was going through my centre point as well. And if you've cut that fairly well, you should be able to get it to line up in the middle. So that's it. That's our template. Now, the reason I said to put the diagonal in, I've got my die here. So this happens to be a tonic die, but it doesn't matter. It could be any shape, any size, as long as it fits in your quarter. Now, I want to make sure that I've got an even-ish. I eyeballed this. You could get really technical and measure the size of your die and everything, but if you can imagine, your line around the edge here is always going to be double what it is here, because in the middle here, you've obviously got the space both sides of the line. So if you want an even border all around, this needs to be roughly double from this line to here. That makes sense. And it's really helpful if you've got the diagonal, because you can make sure your points line up, so it will always be the same spacing from these two. So I want to make this and this so that this bit is roughly half of this bit, so probably out a little bit. Now I just did that by eye. I'm not the best at lining things up, but I can guess that. So I'm going to go for about there. And I've just got some low tack washi tape, whatever tape you want to use to hold it in place. And I've got a bit of extra there that I obviously had flipped around. Let me just chop that off. I don't want that extra piece. But I reuse my washi tape until it really isn't sticky anymore. So I've got that cut down, and then all I need to do is line that up with my bottom piece of card. Now, this is why I had the extra bit. If you want to, you can stick that down. Now, in my die cut machine, look, I treated myself to a new plate for the new year. Because I've got a magnetic plate in my die cut machine, I haven't found a need really to stick my 2 layers together. If you're worried about your 2 layers shifting, then by all means do what I did. I just made a little flap. So The important point now is don't take your die off here. Now, if you've used tape and it's stuck like that, it should be fine. So all we need to do now is rotate. So we don't flip your bottom card over. Just do the same thing. Just line it up, put it on your plate. Isn't it lovely having a new top plate? I've not had a new top plate in years. And cut through again. So again, so as you can see, I've not done too bad a job. It's probably slightly wider in the middle than it is on the edge. So this is the piece that's obviously cut out of the template. You can obviously save your squares. So again, don't move your bottom, don't flip your bottom paper over or anything. Just line it up. And back through my die cut machine. One more rotation. There's my nice red frame cut out. So if I had to buy a die that did that, that would be, or how much are 6x6 cover plate dies? It would be quite a lot. But that's, I don't like measuring. To me, that was so quick to create this. And the beauty of this now, what I would do is write on the back or in the centre somewhere that this is a 15cm square. And I could have 4 different apertures on here. And I can take this off. And as long as I can find the die that matches up to it, I could also put here tonic, square. If I got really clever, I could count from either the inside or the outside and say that this is, I can see it on my board, 1, 2, 3, this is number 4. 4 from the, counting up from the inside. So tonic square number 4. So I could get that, it dropped back in obviously like a puzzle piece, tape it back in, and then I could reuse this template as many times as I wanted. And the only measuring I had to do was to know to split my paper in half in both directions, which with a square obviously is really easy. Just to finish this card up, all I did was, using the little squares I cut out, I just used, I think these are the, I think they're Altenew dies. So just using the squares I cut out and little Altenew, I can't remember the name of it. If I can find it, I'll link it in the description. It's one of the chunky alphabet dies. It doesn't matter, any alphabet die would work. So I just cut out LOVE, but obviously it could be hugs, it could be, you know, any 4-letter word. And I actually cut them carefully out the centres of these squares and saved the little inside pieces. And I've got an idea for another card to use the scraps. So this was a no waste card. I decided my red card didn't quite match the red that's in this paper. So I thought what I'd do is do a little bit of inking on it just to darken it. If you've got good juicy dye inks, you can just go a bit of direct to paper. And I don't mind if this ends up being a little bit uneven because my paper's quite a distressed look to it anyway. But this uses less ink than trying to go from white paper, say. I could have used tape runner on this, but this is the point in time I realised my daughter's borrowed my tape runner, which means it will never reappear. So I'm going with wet glue and trying not to get it on my big fluffy sleeves. And I'm gonna lift this up on some foam tape. So I was debating making this into a shaker card, but I forgot to put the acetate in. So guess what? it's not being the shaker card anymore. I'm just going to go with these being the same colour and just do the same thing and just raise them up on some foam tape. And if you don't like using foam squares, you can always cut multiples. So let's make sure we spell it right. So there we go. LOVE, like I say, but any 4-letter word you could put in there. I encourage you to go and look through. If you've got pattern papers, you can find things that you can make a really simple card with. And I'm just thinking I might put some glossy accents on the letters just so that they end up shiny. So there we are, ready with its glossy accents on. I just need to leave that somewhere out of the way to dry. Hopefully, don't stick my arm in it. So for the next card, I thought I'd just show you another way to use the same idea. So we're going to do a little window scene. This is called You've Got Mail. This is from Time for Tea Designs. And I've not used these stamps yet. I've had them for probably a year. And I picked a square die from my set that was sort of just big enough that I could have some of these cute little images. And this time I've gone for a 6x6" square card. So I cut my 6" top panel. I've cut one to stamp on because I didn't want to stamp directly on my card because these aren't the best card bases for that. I did exactly the same thing, made myself a template that was 6" square and did exactly the same thing. This happened to be a Sizzix die that's got stitches on it, but you won't see them because they're on the inside. I'm just going to, on my panel that I want to stamp onto, use my pencil just to very, very, very lightly draw where my window frames are going to be. And then we can rub this out at the end. And you can obviously do this for, it doesn't need to be a scene. You can do this for placement of any stamping that you want to show through, or placing die cuts or anything that you want to show through your top panel. So I've just got a rough idea where those squares are going to be, and I can do myself some sort of little scene with my snails. Something like this. So we've got the You've Got Mail, and then to make it a joke, I'm going to put snail mail, and then we'll have our little scene down the bottom with our snail headed towards his post box to get his post. So I'm going to repeat stamp the mail over here as well. And because I'm going to do it in alcohol ink, I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black. So I'm just going to do some basic colouring on this, and you'll get the idea what it's going to look like. So there we go, just some really simple colouring, just to give you the idea. And then I'm just going to come in and rub out my pencil lines. So all that's left to do is, I'm going to keep this really simple, pop this up on some foam tape so we get the nice shadow around it. I could do a bit of ink blending around the window if I wanted to. I could have used my outline. I could have ink blend through this, use it as a mask. There's all sorts of things you could do using this idea. Whatever you've got in your stash, whatever products you've been thinking, oh, I must use that. So there you go, I could add some bling, do whatever I want to fancy that up a bit. But yeah, if you've got any sort of stamps that lend themselves to little window scenes, I could have left out one of the squares because we're doing our own cover die. If I wanted 3 squares, so I wanted the You've Got Mail and then the little window at the bottom, I could have left this one and put something completely different up here rather than having all the apertures, or I could have the 2 on the diagonal. Because you're not using a cover plate die, you can choose exactly how many openings you want. So if you were making these into shaker cards, you could have 3 openings and then a sentiment flat without having to make that, you know, an aperture as well, which you would have to do if it was a cover die that cut this shape. So you can match your openings as long as you've got a die to suit your stamps or your die cuts or whatever else it is you want to use. So for this next card, I want to show you what didn't work. So when I first thought of doing this idea and using the idea of rotating to make basically like a cover plate style background, I originally thought this idea might work. I wanted to have kind of a reusable template, something that I could use over and over again. And my first thought, which didn't work but might work for you, was to do this. So I cut myself a piece of 6x6 card. So this is a piece of card underneath here. And I put press and seal over it. So if you're in the US, you're probably familiar with press and seal. It's not as easy to get your hands on in the UK as it is in the US, but you can get it on Amazon. So, and some of the craft shops sell it as well. So my idea was that, press and seal, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's a bit like cling film, but it's got a very light tack to it. So this side isn't sticky and this side is. So it's really helpful if you're placing lots of die cuts. You can place all your die cuts, put your press and seal on, and then lift them up, turn them over and put glue on. And it works brilliantly for things like that. You can also make your own sort of sticky blending mat with it as well, which is the other thing I could have used this for. But I thought I could use this as a reusable template and use this to stick my die to, which is what I did. I did the same thing. I'd drawn my I'd drawn my quarters. I hadn't done diagonals, but I had drawn my quarters on it. And I put my die in there and ran it through my die cut machine. And as you can see, the card stuck. And it was really, really, really cold in my craft lab when I did this. And I tried heating it with a heat gun and the press and seal, hopefully you can see here, the press and seal melted, so that wasn't great, unfortunately. I warmed it up on my radiator under my desk and I did start to be able to get it to peel away. So hopefully you can see, I can kind of get this off. And so although I've got that off there, and this is still sticky, so it kind of would work. There's like a residue left on the card as well. So some of this low tack stick has got 2 stuck. And this was a pretty good quality, smooth card stock I was using. It didn't have any texture to start with, but as you can see, it failed. Now, if you're somewhere that's warmer, more humid, I don't know what conditions, this might work. It might be worth giving it a try. So all I did was put my press and seal over my piece of cardstock, and the intention was going to be that I could put my die on, leave it on there whilst I was doing this, and then rotate and do it the same method. This might work for you. Then the second thing I thought I'd try was, I've got some of these, they're just the Nicapa, but they're intended to go in like a Cricut cutting machine. So these are the generic sticky mats, which I cut down to use inside things like my Misty, my stamping press, or to hold stencils on. So I thought, well, maybe that would work. And because this is a clear one, I could see through it. So I cut this down to, it's not 6 inches square, but it's 6 inches wide. So I didn't have to draw any lines on it. And you will see how I created this particular background later on. And again, just with my die, I stuck my die to my mat where I wanted it in the first quarter and ran that through my die cut machine. And it sort of worked. Again, I think if it was warmer, this might work. So if you've got some of these mats that, you know, you're happy to cut up or they'll fit through your die cut machine anyway, I think this would have worked maybe if it had been warmer. But I found that the tack gets more tacky when it's cold and it doesn't want to release. So this didn't really leave much residue, which you'd hope for because it is designed to stick paper and card to, but it's still, obviously where the pressure was more, started to stick to my cardstock. So it wasn't perfect. Again, that might work for you. So then again, this would be reusable time and time and time and time again without you having to create your own thing. So that was one idea that again may work for you. Didn't quite work for me. Then the next way that I used does work. Again, it depends on it being warm enough. If you've not got those sorts of mats, but you've got this stuff, this is Crafter's Companion Stick and Spray. This is the stick spray stamp. And the idea of this is if you've got the unmounted rubber stamps, the ones that are grey rubber or red rubber that don't have the cling stuff on the back, you could spray this on those, or you can use it on stencils, that type of thing. So it's a repositionable craft adhesive. I think this is pretty much the same as pixie spray. I don't have any pixie spray to confirm that, but I'm guessing it's very similar to pixie spray. And what I did to start with is sprayed it onto some paper. I cut my paper to the size I wanted it. I should have drawn some guidelines on there, but I was using circles this time, so I didn't. But you could do the same, draw some guidelines on, cut your paper to the same size as the cardstock you were using. And then this is really important. What I didn't do with my first one, so I went down to a 5-inch square for these. What I didn't do to start with was take a little bit of the stick off. I'm hoping you can see. White on white's really difficult to get it to show up. But again, it ripped slightly. So what I did was I created myself another template and ran it through my die cut machine with just some copy paper on it. So I went back up to a 6x6, and this has still got stick and spray on it. And this has already cut all these ones, and you can see this would still be reusable. So this is still slightly sticky. I could still get another set of dies to stick to this, I think, because I think once I ran it through my cutting machine, it would still adhere. And again, I think if I warmed this up slightly, this would work better. And it worked better warming it up to peel it off. So again, if you've got stick and spray and copy paper, you could do exactly the same thing. So that was how I created these ones, and I was just doing different shapes, different things. And then I thought, well, hold on a minute, the copy paper, because it's thin, it's quite hard to line up with the edges, and the stick and spray sticks to anything. So what I did was I went back and created myself a new template out of acetate. So this is just thin acetate. This is just the stuff that, you know, you can use on overhead projectors. This is not heat-proof acetate, which I remembered when I used my heat gun to warm it up. So don't, if you're not using heat-proof acetate, you don't want to heat it. So I can warm this on my radiator, but as you can see, it's still pretty sticky. So all I did was use my spray box, use my stick and spray. You could try it with pixie spray. And then I forgot again to run it through my die cut machine with a piece of copy paper, because if you don't do that, this is what happens. It will peel a bit of your paper up to start with. So I completely forgot to do that. And then I remembered, oh, I should have run that through with some copy paper. But the interesting thing is, when the copy paper was really stuck, when this card, sorry, was really stuck to this, I actually washed it. And to get the bits that stuck to it, I gave it a wash, and it worked. It got the paper off without it losing its stick. So I'm just going to eyeball, and I'm going to show you that this is going to work. So this has cut quite a few pieces. This is acetate, completely reusable. It's going to be easy to line up because, as you can see, I can see through it. So actually I think I'm going to put that a bit closer to the centre. So I could use this with as many different shapes as I wanted. And you can see the sort of, it's like a fibrous spray. So exactly the same thing. Line up my edges, and because it's acetate, it's a bit stiffer than just a piece of paper would be. And I could just do the same method. And I'm doing it on red because it's easier for you to see on camera how easily it can peel off. I didn't warm it up, and it did very slightly catch and take some of my paper off. But this isn't really super smooth card. So, but you can see the die stays stuck, but because it's repositionable, there's no residue left on my die. And this, again, I could reuse this time and time again. These are thin enough that you don't need to adapt anything in your cutting machine. I will say, I forgot to mention, when I used this mat in my cutting machine, in my Big Shot, it happens to be a C6 Big Shot I've got, but this is a bit thicker. So rather than using my magnetic mat, I used the one that's got the different tabs, so you can put different thicknesses through, and I took the top one off. So I only had the bottom, so I still had the thicker one, but I took the thinnest one off just to account for the fact that there is a bit of thickness to this. But it'll vary from die cut machine to die cut machine, and even individual machines. And my acetate happened, because it was the overhead stuff, happened to come with these grid sheets so that you could write on them and keep it straight. But I can keep that on its sheet because it's like a wax paper. So just to keep the stick, I think this has lost some of its stick because I didn't stick it to anything, and everything in my craft room picks up dog hairs eventually, because I do have 2 dogs who come and sit out here with me when I'm not filming. So I'm going to show you how to do this with the paper template. I got this far on this card before realising that I'd not hit record. So I'm going to redo this and show you how I did this. And this is the perfect card for me because, as I've just proved, I need my coffee. So I'm using the Time for Tea Designs. This one is called the Coffee Lover stamp set. And I've got the coordinating dies, but I thought I'd just do some stamping. So I've got a 6x6 card blank, and I've not folded it yet because I'm going to run it through my die cut machine. This is my piece of copy paper that has got pixie spray on it that I've used time and time again now. So it's still kind of tacky, but it's not really, really tacky. Now, because I've got my stamps ready, because I did this, forgot to hit record, happens to us all, I'm going to try and line it up so that I don't have to realign all my stamps. So that's the only reason I'm using exactly the same spot. Hopefully there's still enough tack on this that once I've run it through and it's warmed up a bit, it will hold my die in the right place. So pop it on my die cut machine, lined up with my card. My card is open. And this is why I wanted to have my die cut cam running today, so that you can see I'm not doing anything exciting. So hopefully, yeah, that stayed stuck. Whoopsie, it's gone sliding off. But as you can see, the pixie spray doesn't leave, it's not pixie spray, sorry, it is the Crafter's Companion version, I assume, of pixie spray. but it sticks, it holds the die. It's not stuck to my paper, it's not pulled my card stock up. It's just getting the right level of stick if you're making your own template. And like I said, if you've got one of those sticky mats, it's probably worth a try with that as well. So you can see this has been used loads and loads and loads of times, and you can see it's sticky but not too sticky. So for this one, I'm just cutting apertures in the front of my card, and I only want 2 in this case, but I didn't have to measure, and they're the same distance from this corner as that corner without measuring, just using a paper template with the Crafter's Companion repositionable sticker spray. So all I'm going to do, because I've actually already set it up, because I forgot to hit record, I'm just going to put my card in there. I am just going to stick a magnet on it, double check that everything's still in the same place, more or less, good enough. Yeah. So again, if you wanted to remake the same card over and over again, this would actually allow you to do that, because you can repeat in exactly the same places. My memento actually really needs re-inking, so I'm not going to get the best images. So I've just done the 2 that I want to colour with my alcohol markers with memento, and they've actually not coloured badly that time. And then I'm using Catherine Pooler over coffee on these are the ones. And as you can see, like a lot of dye inks, it dries a lot lighter. This is exactly the same ink, and you can see it's dried a lot lighter. A little solid coffee bean. I just went round and did a little bit of random stamping. So we've got on the outside, I've got coffee and a smudge. You know, we can always put another coffee bean over that. Coffee first, then I do the things, because adulting is hard, and that's how I feel today, having forgotten to press record. So all I'm going to do to finish this card up is just do a bit of quick colouring. I wish I'd stamped down here more randomly, but yeah, there we go. It is what it is. So we've got coffee first, then I do the things, because adulting is hard. So that was just a really quick bit of stamping and basic colouring, and we've got a cute card. Now, if it bothers you that the colouring can go through onto the back, just do yourself a panel. You can always make it just slightly smaller. And then obviously here I've got room for a personal message in this bit that won't show through. Or if you've done it like this and you've done it straight onto your card blank, just pop yourself a panel on the back. So I don't worry about it, but if you use alcohol markers, even with like 300 GSM heavyweight card, it probably will go through. So this next card, I thought I'll show you how I'm going to decorate it and then show you the technique. So I'm back to the You've Got Mail stamp that I used on the second card we did. So this is again Time for Tea Designs, and they also do this lovely, it's obviously slimline, but it does postage stamps. It's got the little envelope, and I'm using, and I'll show you, it's not in here at the moment, the postage stamp and the small square, and I'm going to be using that, and I'll show you why it's not back in there yet. So all I did was a little bit of free range stamping, you know, just with it on acrylic blocks, just to make some little postage stamps. And I pulled a piece of pattern paper. This could be a stamp background, foil background, whatever you're using. And I just pulled my polished ink from Catherine Pooler because it was the closest match that I could find, just so I could ink blend my little squares. So that's all I've done. Oh, and it is a little bit of just alcohol marker pen colouring, but I just did really basic 2 colours just so they all match. So they're going to be little postage stamps. With my patterned paper, which obviously isn't very thick, so couldn't be the front of my card, I'm just going to cut myself another 6x6 square, because this is a 6x6 card blank. Again, any size square, doesn't matter. It just needs to be square for this always to work well. And in my next video, I'm actually going to talk about ways to do this on other shapes, but it needs to be square for it to work. Now, this is my die, and I've already used this method to cut this panel, and I'm actually going to end up layering these 2 together. You'll understand in a moment why. And I want these apertures to be in exactly the same places as these, which isn't the easiest thing to do. So using all those different sticky methods, I thought of my sticky all over post-it notes. Now, I can't find if these are still available. I've had these for quite a few years. These are Post-it brand label pads. They are full adhesive. So these are basically Post-it notes that have got their super sticky, just the same as on the super sticky Post-it notes, but it's full adhesive. And these ones were made in the USA, but I got these in Ryman's in the UK some years ago. And at the time, I bought 4 packets. So I've still not opened my second 2 packets. So this is what they look like. This was my daughter making a card. She uses it for masking. We use it for masking all the time. So they're kind of the reverse of Post-it notes. So this bit doesn't have any sticky, and then the whole rest of the Post-it note has sticky on it. And they came obviously in different sizes. These weren't quite big enough for what I was doing today, but they came in 2 different sizes. I've searched even by the barcode on Amazon in the UK, and I can't find them. So if you can find them, the full adhesive label pads, and as an alternative, I found this in Flying Tiger in the UK, and this is just called paper tape, and it was with like the idea of the journals and things, and this is literally exactly the same thing. It's like Post-it note. It's not washi tape. It is definitely paper like a Post-it note is, and it is sticky tape, and this is sticky all over, and this would work in exactly the same way as well. So again, keep your eye out in Flying Tiger, which I know is across most of Europe these days. I think it's a Danish company originally, but they're in lots of town centres in the UK. So Flying Tiger, their paper tape will work exactly the same way. But yeah, and this is definitely still available. The Post-it labelling cover-up tape would work the same, but obviously it's much smaller, and as you'll see, you need it really to be a bit bigger. So what I did, one of my larger Post-it tape labels, I just cut it down. I didn't cut it straight. So this is the cut edge. So this I know is a square edge, and hopefully you can see I've got a tiny cross in that top corner. And what I did, as I have done when I have a full sheet template, is line it up in my top corner. So this is how I did this. I lined up my die where I wanted it, and then I lined up my Post-it tape to the top corner. So you'll see, and then did the same thing. And the reason I put the cross in the corner is to remember which is the one that I'm lining up to the corner. Now I've not taken this off here because I want to do the same to my patterned paper, and it will become clear why I want to do that. So this being Post-it tape doesn't leave a residue. It is reusable time and time again. So we've got exactly the same principle. So although I haven't got a full sheet, I've got enough to cover the corner that I'm using, and then I can rotate it. So back onto the die cut machine. So we can, oh, other than the post-it tape started to split because I've used it so many times now. So just being careful. It's not ripped my paper, and because it's paper, you can sort of push your die cut piece out. So this is why it's important. If you've spun it round and you don't know which corner you're using, just be careful of that. So again, I'm just rotating the corner that I've got my little cross in. I'm lining it up, and hopefully this will match up with my bottom panel. We'll see how accurate I'm being. I could have done these both at the same time. Didn't think of it, you know. Like I say, my post-it tape is starting to split, but it's still going to keep working. So this same post-it note is going to have done 8 cuts by the time I finish this. So I think if I thought about it further in advance, I could have cut these two. I could have temporarily taped these two together and cut them both at the same time, and then I wouldn't have been worried about lining it up twice. So that's using a sticky post-it tape. And I'd say I've not done a bad job, considering I didn't cut those together. I don't think they're going to line up quite perfectly, but pretty good. And I don't mind if there's a tiny bit of a white border. The other thing I wanted to show you whilst I was doing this, if you can't find the sticky all over post-it tape, but you've got stick and spray, pixie spray, something like that, you can do the same thing. But I would recommend doing the same idea, doing it on copy paper, thin paper. And the reason being, if you don't do a full sheet, so it gets past it sticks too much because you're only using a small piece. And I thought I'd show you. I tried to do it on white, but I'm not sure that this is going to show up very well on camera. So I did it on this gold, because hopefully, if I get this in the light right, I think you can see it that. If you do it on a piece of thicker card, you end up with an indent where the card's been, and it shows up fairly well. Hopefully you can see that. You can see. So that was cut with this. The same idea. You can line it up to the corner, but don't do it on card, because I was thinking, oh, I could make a more sturdy card template that's easier to line up to the corner, but then even on the white, I can see a line where I did it. I was trying to illustrate. So yes, you could still do this method using copy paper and some sort of repositionable spray like the stick and spray or the pixie spray. It will work as well. And to finish up this card, what I'm going to do is cut off most of, but not all, of my front panels. So I've got what, about, I know how much I can leave. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm cutting off, so I've got enough to stick these two, but without the border showing, and that should be plenty. Again, I don't measure things, very rarely. And hopefully it will become clear. I could have done this straight into the card, but doing it this way meant I could use the panel I'd already cut and not have to keep doing it. So all I'm going to do is put wet glue down here and stick my solid one in here, and then I'm going to cover the join by putting the patterned one on top, and then it'll be neat from the front and the back, and you won't see my join at all. And I could have sandwiched some acetate in here and had things floating on the acetate. So this way to do the card front is another way that you could sandwich acetate between these two layers and then have an element that opens with the card front as well. And I'm going to lift these ones up on foam tape. So we've got Happy Mail, and in that stamp set there is Sending You, and I have got the coordinating dies for this. So I'm just going to pop a Sending You across the middle. And that same die set cuts out these cute little envelopes. And I did wonder about popping some of those on, but I think I should have put it underneath there, because I think anywhere else is going to get caught because I've not stuck those flat. I'm not sure I've got anywhere else I can do it. Should we pull that off? There we go. Sending You, Happy Mail. And I know that I could actually write my personal message anywhere on the inside that's not where these stamps are, or I could just go for it and put it on the back. So for my last card, number 5, I thought I would do a shaker card because, of course, this technique lends itself to doing shaker cards. Now, I thought I'd show you how I did a really complicated aperture. If you wanted to buy this as a cover die, that would be an expensive piece of crafting equipment that you'd probably only use at Valentine's Day. But heart dies, these ones that I was using, these are really old Spellbinders ones that came with the Spellbinders Sapphire, which is the little tiny die cut machine. So you can very often pick up little tiny dies like this for sort of £1 or so. Even in Hobbycraft, they sometimes have, you know, just small individual dies or stamps. This could be a stamp outline. Now, because it was a heart, obviously if I'd put it straight and rotated it, it would have ended up all different ways up. So I popped it to the middle like this. And because I thought it would be easier to line up, I went back to my original way of doing it, and this was I think this was the original template that I first cut square out of. And this is what I mean. You can reuse the same template with all different shapes. So that was all I did. I didn't do them both at the same time. I cut the big one exactly the same way. I literally had my die, taped it to my piece of paper where I wanted it. Again, the diagonal helped me line it up so that it was equal. And so this was taped here, and I just rotated it and cut it. And then I went back and placed my smaller die on the same template, and they would have overlapped, so I couldn't have cut them at the same time. If your dies, if whatever pattern you're doing doesn't overlap, you could cut them at the same time. So then I've got what looks like it should be a fancy cover plate, but actually it's just 2 dies. So I'm just going to make this into a shaker. And because I don't want my shaker bits disappearing too much into the corners, I'm going to put some across the corners, I think. And what I've got to pop inside it is this really fun confetti. So I got this, I think I got this last year, but this is, if you're in the UK, this is just from the Works in the UK. And I know they've had it back because I've seen it. I don't know if they've got any yet this year, but they might have something similar. But it's like the little clay pieces. And I'm thinking, because this is so big, I think we're going to need quite a lot of these. So there you go. That's why I use that thicker tape, because the confetti's quite thick. I think we'll just do Sending You and Love. And I think I might get some sequins or something to, or we could just use some of the confetti actually. That's a good idea. Let's do that. There we go. One shaker card with a really fancy aperture in it. So just as a recap, that's my 5 cards today, and I wanted just to recap the 5 techniques, different ways you can try to do this rotating die cut technique. The first one is obviously just use paper template, really simple. The other one you could try is, you could definitely try, if you're in a warmer place than I am, the press and seal, which didn't work for me but might work for you. You can definitely get the stick and spray, Crafter's Companion stick and spray, or try Pixie Spray just on copy paper. Or you could try one of these sticky mats. You can also try stick and spray on acetate or Pixie Spray on acetate. Any sort of repositionable adhesive that doesn't leave residue on your card and you can peel it off once you've run it through your die cut machine. It's going to take a bit of experimentation, which is what I did. The one that has consistently worked, obviously, is the paper template. And then the 5th one is, if you've got it or you can find anything like it, is the Post-it label pads that are sticky all over, or this type of paper tape. It just needs to be big enough to fit in your corners. So that's at least 5 different ways you could try to do the rotating die cut. Obviously the simplest and easiest, but isn't, well, it is reusable but only with the same shape, is just to make yourself a paper template. The same idea of rotating your dies, so you don't have to do any fancy measuring. You can have 3 apertures, you can have 2 apertures, you can have, like this one, 8, using multiple dies. Anything that will make a rotating pattern. It's a great way to use your basic dies, use some of your supplies. Don't forget to go and leave a comment on my 1,000 subscriber video. If the comments are open, the competition is still open, and I will switch off comments in 2 or 3 days, so probably by Thursday of this week. This is Monday the 15th of January as I'm recording this. I think I'll be closing it probably on Thursday, so you might have a couple of days still to get those comments on. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.